Hello there everybody, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. We're going to spend the next half hour or so looking at some of the steps needed to get you set up and organised with your Creo licenses and software. My name is Matt Bancroft, and I'm one of the CAD technical team here at Concurrent Engineering. Founded in 1991, Concurrent Engineering is the UK's leading reseller of PTC software solutions. Based in Solihull in the heart of the UK, we are ideally located to service companies nationwide. Concurrent Engineering help UK manufacturers optimise globalisation, time to market and operational efficiency through an integrated suite of solutions across the product lifecycle. As a PTC partner, Concurrent Engineering is trained and certified in PTC solutions and can provide a complete solution comprising products, services, training and support. Now, as part of that support, when talking with our customers, we're often asked to provide guidance on managing Creo licenses, how to download and install software, and how best to ensure that the administration of your CAD software can be done efficiently and effectively. So I've put together some video content which will give you a step-by-step walkthrough of this important aspect of your day-to-day work. Having a properly licensed and smoothly running Creo parametric will ensure that you fulfill compliance requirements and take advantage of this class-leading software. We'll go through the entire process in some detail, starting with some sensible steps to take before you start installing anything, and looking at the distinct types of licenses available and what each of them can give you. Then we're going to look at installing the license, essentially fixing it to your workstation, and the different processes required depending on whether you have a fixed or a floating license. We'll then discuss how to download your Creo software and some sensible questions to ask at that point. And then the download and installation of the Creo software itself, ensuring that you include any of the available specialist extensions. And then finally, we're taking some time to find out how to move your license to a different machine and removing it from your old one. And also how to swap out a new license into an existing installation, which is normally done whenever you renew your license each year. Okay, so your first job is to create yourself a PTC eSupport account. This is a straightforward process, but taking a bit of care with it is certainly worthwhile. You'll also need your service contract number or sales order number, or your site number to complete it. These numbers can be found with your PTC software order fulfillment letter, which you should have received by email when you purchased the software. Of course, you can always contact us here at Concurrent Engineering if you need any help with this. So let's have a look at this page. Obviously, all the input fields that have red asterisks are needed. And just make sure that you're using your work email, not a personal one. Create and confirm a password, and input here either the SCN, the service contract number, or the SON, the sales order number, or the site number. And then complete the security challenge, entering these three underlined numbers. Now from here you press Create Account, and you'll get an email in a few moments from PTC just to verify your account creation, and then you're good to go. Now, all the information you're going to need regarding your Creo license and the software itself is found on the PTC support pages. On the landing page here, you can see there are quick links to support managing software, learning collateral, information about hardware compatibility, etc. There's also a link here to the PTC community where you can ask fellow users advice. You can share good practice that you found useful as well. The links with the orange lock are for users such as yourself with full access to the support content. So log in, inputting your username, essentially your email address at the top, with that password that you've just created, and let's log in. Now what I'd recommend here is that you go to this link at the very top right, underneath popular tasks. There's the Creo parametric support page. Essentially what you have here are hyperlinks to all the useful and necessary areas of the portal that you're going to use to organise your licenses and your Creo software. One thing I'd mention at this stage, and something that's critically important, is taking a look at what machine you plan to use when working with Creo. Now obviously Creo is an extremely competent and complex piece of software and does require a certain level of hardware specification to run effectively. Depending on what version of Creo you're using, there are slight variations regarding your computer. So let's take a brief look at the required hardware specs. I'll click on the link here and then press in this by product drop down, and then go to the version of Creo currently supported by PTC that you've selected. There's a PDF here with hardware specifications, operating systems, graphic cards, etc. Again, get in touch if you need some support with this. Another crucial point is about program compatibility. Of course, the latest version of Creo is always going to be the most capable with the newest features and functionality. However, it's imperative that you check 1. Your hardware is compatible and capable enough to run the software. 2. Any product lifetime management systems or additional software that you use is compatible, for example Windchill, which you can check on the PTC website as well. And 3. That any colleagues, third parties or teams at other sites of your business are using the same version of Creo as you are. So for example, if you created a file in Creo 9 and shared it with a colleague, they would need at least Creo 9 to open it. So Creo is not backwards compatible, so it's critical that you check this. When you purchase your software, and to ensure that it's compliant and properly supported, it requires a license to run. There are essentially 2 types of licenses and a few other points of interest to mention. A locked license is installed on your machine and allows you to open and work with Creo on that machine only. There's also available a floating license, and there's a couple of situations where these might be chosen over the locked version. A floating license can behave the same way as a locked license, simply sitting on your machine. In fact, that's what I've got on mine. But it can also be put on a shared drive or server, where you or one of your colleagues can access the license as and when required. So for example, if you're in a team of say 5 users, but you don't necessarily need access to Creo every hour of the week, you might purchase, for example, 3 licenses, place them on a central server, and then 3 of the 5 users can access the license in a first-come, first-served basis. When you purchase a license, you also get what's called a home use license. This is not a replacement for a full license, and it is to be used at home only. Home use licenses are only to be used by staff who have a full license equivalent at work, and can't be used on the work Wi-Fi network. Also available for users who may work in multiple global sites are global licenses. Standard Creo licenses are only to be used in the country in which they were purchased. Of course, again, if you've got any questions about these, get in touch with us at Concurrent Engineering. We can discuss your specific requirements. So your next job is to install the license to your machine. Now this is going to be one of 2 things. Firstly, a locked license is saved onto the hard drive of a single user's workstation. Whereas, as I mentioned earlier, a floating license may be installed in the same way, or onto a centralized or shared server. Whichever of these 2 situations you require, the first thing you're going to need is the MAC ID, sometimes called the host ID, of the machine. A host ID is a unique code which each computer has. It's a little bit like a fingerprint, and this will ensure that your installation of Creo is compliant and runs as it should. Finding the host ID of your machine is simple. On the Windows icon in the bottom left or in the search bar next to it, simply type in CMD, which is shortcut for command prompt. This brings up this black user interface, and in here type get MAC, or one word, in lowercase. The command prompt will return the host ID of your machine. Make a note of this. If needed, copy and paste it into a Word document or just a text document. As you can see, there are a series of numbers and letters with dashes between them. You'll need this in a moment. Back on the PTC support page, you can see in the centre we've got the licenses and installation area. Now this is the area that we'll be concentrating on. There's some useful links here, including a series of how-to guides, but realistically we're looking at the first link to manage the licenses and the third link to download your Creo software. To install the license onto your machine, whether it's a fixed or a floating method, is essentially the same. Clicking on the license management brings up this new screen. We can see at the top we've got different drop downs. The ones we're looking at specific are the license actions, and then later the download software. Clicking on the license actions, the first link is to advanced search, and that's what I'd recommend. Here you can search for the licenses that are available, related to a service order number, for example, or service contract number. But to look at all your licenses that are available or potentially already installed, just go down to the search button at the right of the centre of the screen. This will show a list separated under 2 tabs of the licenses that are available or may already be installed. You can see the name of the license and the description and when the support for the license ends. Clicking on the plus next to the name will give you further information about the description of the license itself and the product status, whether it's installed or not, and also how many of those licenses are available. To install the license, check the checkbox next to the license, and then go down to the bottom of the screen and select Install License. Pressing this button will take you to the next screen, and this is where you input the host ID that you saved earlier on. If your license is a locked license, obviously you just select one at the top. If it's a floating one, there might be several. If you're putting them onto a server at the same time, you can select the required quantity at this point, and then enter the host ID into the input box at the bottom of the user interface. Pressing Install License again brings up the confirmation screen. Review this before you finalise the installation of the license itself. Pressing Confirm here, you'll be sent an email with the license ready to install. The email that you receive will include an attached folder which has 2 versions of your license in it. Generally, I go for the file without standard at the end of its name. This will allow borrowing of the license if that's ever needed. Now, a good tip here is to save the license file in a specific place on your machine. I have a folder in my C drive simply called Creo License, in which I keep this inverted commas raw copy of my license saved away. I'm going to show you 2 similar processes here. The first is going to be installing Creo with a locked license, and the second installing a floating license using a piece of software called FlexNet. But irrespective of which method you're going to use, the next job is to download the Creo parametric software to your machine. So we go back to support.ptc.com and the Creo parametric support page. You can see the third link here, download software, which takes you to a new page. Here you have listed all the versions of Creo that are available, even back to Creo 1, as you can see at the bottom there. As I mentioned earlier on, ensure that your version of Creo matches the requirements and the compatibility for any third-party software or product lifetime management systems, and that of your colleagues and partners. Of course, the most recent version of Creo would be the most comprehensive and capable, but it's not unusual for customers to still be using older versions. In fact, you can have several versions of Creo installed on the same machine if necessary. They all run on the same license. The license is essentially for up to and including the most recent version. Also on this page, you can see just above there's a link to the FlexNet software that we're going to be looking at later on. Clicking on the plus icon next to the release of Creo that you require, you can see that there are 3 further drop-downs available. We're going to go for the middle one here, Creo for Windows, and then underneath that you can see during its life cycle, each version of Creo will go through different iterations, essentially versions. So say for example you might have Creo 9050. Now select the version that you need and then click the Win64 HTTPS button. You can see it's a big old file, around about 6 gigs. So depending on obviously your internet speed, you can get on another job in the meantime. I'd also recommend that you download the Help Center from the same link at the top there. So this will download to your machine as a zip file. Again, another handy hint here will be to cut and paste the downloaded zip file to your hard drive. Again, creating a new folder in there to store the download media. Extract the zip files using Windows or a third-party software plugin. Now double-click this folder here, and then you're going to go down to setup.exe, which is the penultimate shortcut at the bottom there. Double-click or right-click and run as admin, depending on your company's policies. And here you can see that we're going to install new software. Then down to the bottom right where it says next, and then on the next page accept the software license agreement and check the box underneath for compliance. This section is where we're going to add our license. You can see underneath the word source we've got the box and also a folder icon to the left. Now you can either drag and drop your license file from your folder that you created for it earlier, or you can use the folder icon to open and search for the license file itself. Underneath you can see the host ID that we found earlier from the Get Mac, and with the license file selected, the installation of the license server begins. Now it can take a few moments, don't panic if it doesn't do it straight away, but then the license server will say available when complete. Again, press next. This next section, the application selection section, allows you to specify the installation path for Creo. You can see here I've got it on my D drive, many users simply put it on their C drive, and then ensure that Creo parametric is ticked, and then any of the utilities you might require underneath, for example platform services, net framework, etc. Now press next again. Now this area is where you define which specific features your installation is going to include. You can see obviously we've got Creo Parametric at the top, but then further ones, the Render Studio for example, Creo Simulate. If you have any extensions you've purchased, you can specify them here. Further down you can specify language for example, if that's a requirement. And then at the top go to the Command Configuration tab. Move across to the Edit button on the right, and here you can specify which, if any, extensions to your standard license you wish to include. If you do have any extensions you need to include, you need to select them in the left-hand box, use the arrow in the middle to move them across the right-hand box. When you're happy with that, press OK, and then you're ready to install. So press the install button, and then depending on the speed of your computer, this can take anywhere from a couple of minutes to a little bit longer. Once the installation is finished, simply press the Finish button, and you'll see that there's a new shortcut on your desktop. Now the first time you double click this to begin Creo, there might be a couple of warnings about your company firewall. Obviously check with your IT department if needed on this. Installing the Help Center that you downloaded as well is also fairly straightforward. Again, when it's downloaded from the support page, unzip, go to setup.exe and install a local copy of all the help files for Creo. So now let's take a look at installing a floating license using FlexNet software. In many ways it's very similar to the process we've just been through, but it's more likely to be seen in a situation where several users may need to access a Creo license as being part of the team. So the FlexNet software will be installed on the server on your company's local network. Again, there are a couple of checks that need to be done regarding compatibility. The server version needs to be recent enough to support the newest versions of software, of course. Again, any questions on this, do get in touch. We can provide compatibility matrices. So from the support pages, we install the license or licenses to the host ID of the server. Then the next stage is to download the FlexNet software. The link to do so is on the Download Software section on the support.ptc page. Use the hyperlink named FlexNet Hardware Notes from here, which will open up a new page with hyperlinks to the most recent versions of FlexNet. You can see the license manager on the left-hand side. You've got LMadmin and LMGRD. The LMadmin is the automated process and is the one I'd recommend, certainly for new users. You can see the two most recent versions of FlexNet available and the supported platforms in the third column, which show you which servers are compatible with these versions. Again, do be aware that the most recent versions of Creo will require the most recent versions of FlexNet to be fully compatible. And of course the most recent versions of FlexNet will also be obviously compatible with any older versions of Creo Parametric. Again, select the download link at the top and it will download into the appropriate folder on your machine. This is a much smaller file, around about 90 megabytes. Again, if required, cut and paste the zip file to its own folder on your hard drive. Now this is essentially the same process as we went through earlier. Unzip the FlexNet admin folder and again double click or right click and run as administrator the setup.exe icon shortcut at the bottom of the list. Just 3 stages to go through here. Install license server is selected, go to next. Agree to the license conditions and the compliance by ticking and checking the box underneath. And then again, where it says license identification, either drag and drop the license file on the server to the box or open the folder and search for it directly from there, just like before. It will take a few moments to install the license server itself, after which the status will show as available, and then you can simply press Finish. On the end user's computers, you install Creo in exactly the same way as we went through earlier on, with the only difference being at the licensing stage. As mentioned, the computers all need to be on the same network, and as long as they are and they can ping the server, then at the stage where you would either drag the license file in or use the folder to find it, you simply type in 7788, 7788 being the port number, at the name of the server. So for example it would say 7788 at server-1. The license will show as available, and then you can simply go ahead with the standard installation that we went through earlier on. It's quite normal for companies to renew their hardware every few years. Occasionally also laptops and workstations become a bit too long in the tooth to deal with new powerful software. If you are moving Creo to a new workstation, the process is simple, but it does need a little bit of careful management to ensure that everything goes smoothly. It may also be that your workstation or laptop is sadly no longer functional. So let's work through the process of removing a license from the old machine and moving it to a new one. If we go back to support.ptc.com and back to the license management pages, you can see under the two tabs, one being available and one being installed licenses, we're going to go to the installed one. You need to find the licenses to move using the host ID of the retired laptop or workstation. You can search at the top, filtering the search results by the host ID itself. Now, this will find all the licenses or license extensions that are currently installed on that machine. With these results, you can see there may be just one license on there, or you can see with mine there are slightly more. To select all of them, irrespective of how many there are, if you go up to the top left checkbox, it will select all the licenses that we require moving. And at the bottom, on the left hand side of those buttons, the green buttons, you can see it says Move License. Select this, and then on the next screen, select the quantity of the licenses and extensions you're moving. Enter in the new host ID of your new machine, and then destination hostname, where you put in the name of the computer. You can either select zip or text. It doesn't really make much difference. I normally have a text file sent. Select your option there, and then press Move License. You get a confirmation and a statement to say that you are to remove the old license from the old machine for compliance reasons. Confirming that, the license will be moved and a new license sent to you by email. One important note here is that if your old machine is still working and it still has Creo on it, you must remove the physical license from the machine to remain compliant. Again, any questions, just get in touch with us here at Concurrent Engineering. Most Creo licenses are what are called subscription licenses. What this means is that each year you can make changes to the license type or to just continue as you did the previous year. As we saw on the license management page earlier, there was a clear license end date applied to any license, and so when that time comes around, you'll be sent a new license file by email. You can of course also find the license file on your support page, which will be available to apply to your machine. You'll go through the same process as earlier, where you install the license and save it onto the Creo license folder on your C drive. To apply the new license, there are a few steps to go through. Once you've saved it to your machine, ensure that you've exited Creo and saved any files that you need to. Now, best practice here is to stop the service that runs related to the Creo license management. So if you go into your search bar on the bottom left and type in SERV, essentially the shortcut for services will be available. The service that runs the license management is called LM Admin. Find this in the list and then right click and press Stop Service. Now we need to reconfigure Creo using the new license. To do this, we go to the location of the Creo installation on the machine. For me, it's at D, Program Files, PTC, Creo, whatever number, Parametric, and Bin. Now scrolling down to the bottom, you can see Reconfigure there as an executable. Select and right-click and Run as Administrator. And here the process is very similar to what we did earlier on. The default option is to reconfigure existing software, go to Next, and where you see the license that's currently running, remove it by pressing the X icon on the right hand side. Then either drag and drop the new license file into the source box, or again using the folder on the left hand side, search to the location of your new Creo license file. After a few moments it will show as available, then simply go to Next and then to Install. This is all that's needed to renew your license file and keep you happily working on Creo for another year. To reconfigure a floating license on a server, the process is exactly the same. You go to the location of the FlexNet installation on the server itself. Generally this will be the C drive, Program Files, PTC, FlexNet Admin License Server, bin, and then select Reconfigure. Right-click and run as administrator. When doing this, do ensure that you have stopped the service first. It will also be called lmadmin_PTC. And crucially, ensure that any end users that are working with Creo are aware that you're making the change, and for the few minutes that it normally takes, ensure that they have saved any work they are working on currently and exit Creo. They can then restart work when the new license file has been applied. Okay, so we've covered firstly some useful steps and checks prior to installing, then creating a PTC account. Then we looked at installing locked and floating licenses, including downloading and installing FlexNet. We then looked at downloading and installing Creo Parametric itself, and then finally looking at moving a license and reconfiguring a license if you're moving from one machine to another. Now, as it's clear to see, there's some vital admin tasks involved in organising and managing your software and your licenses. Now, if possible, it makes good sense to identify one of your team to take on this responsibility. The role of a CAD admin is one which will ensure your CAD software runs efficiently, your licenses are organised and renewed on time. Keeping an eye on the calendar and being aware of when your renewal date is critical to ensure you avoid any software downtime. So get in touch with us if you have any questions related to this important role. We can provide you with advice and structure to make sure you keep on top of things. Another valuable resource is support.ptc.com, where we've been accessing your licenses and software. Here you can find a selection of useful documents and guides, including the Read This First guide, full of advice on sensible checks to make prior to installing. Also compatibility matrices for Windchill and other software. There's also the knowledge base, full of technical documents on all areas of Creo. It's great for solving those tricky questions or finding out how to achieve a required result. If you do require any further support with your software and licenses, our expert technical support team are on hand to advise and provide technical assistance. So finally, thanks again for joining us today. Be sure to check out our website for upcoming webinars and follow us on LinkedIn to get early access to content as well as updates on PTC products and interesting articles on developments in industry and design software. So enjoy your work with Creo and good luck with your future projects.